We all have been waiting for this, and it finally happened. Omsk oil refinery finally got hammered by the Ukrainian armed forces. Biggest Russian oil refinery, 2,500 kilometers from Ukraine, and it is now in the reach of Ukraine. Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Let's look at what's happening at the front line and how bad Russia is doing in the war overall, because it is pretty bad. In this and many other pro-Ukrainian community, Omsk refinery has been in the eyesights for a very long time. People have been wondering why Ukraine still cannot really reach Omsk refinery. 2,500 kilometers is nothing to scoff about, but everyone was still expecting that at some point Ukraine is going to reach it, and they finally did. We already have some first-hand information about what specifically got struck, and the results are good. The reports are that two of the major refining towers have been struck, so most likely this refinery is now going offline. At least large capacity of this refinery is going offline with no ability to really repair it quickly, because a lot of the same equipment have been struck on other refineries, and it's now a deficit product inside of Russia. So we can update our bingo card. We see that a lot of refineries got struck. Most of the refineries that Ukraine can reach have been struck. Current smaller refineries that we see here, well, they are about 2,800, 3,400 kilometers, and most importantly, like 6,400 kilometers. Everything else is fair play, and Ukraine is doing their best. But Russians need to realize that all of this is going to be a fair game very, very soon. Already now, as Ukraine is striking the refinery in Omsk, right now we see already the producer of Flamingo missile, Firepoint, telling that their new version of the FP1 drone is now being tested, and it has the range of 3,400 kilometers. So the next refineries, please line up. And Ukraine is continuing their operations also in Crimea and other occupied territories, but in Crimea specifically, where there is already a big shortage of fuel, now there is also a shortage of electricity. Ukraine is draining any and all resources from Crimea. Right now, the bridge is becoming a very, very acceptable target for Ukrainians to strike at some point. At least definitely they have the ability to reach it. We saw strikes around the bridge already happening. So to be honest, it's not a too far-fetched idea that at some point Ukrainians are just going to strike the bridge. They haven't done it because there's, I guess, some kind of a plan, but it is very clear that whatever Russians think is going to happen in Crimea, it's not going to go their way. It's getting worse, and it's going to get even worse very, very soon. And all of this is happening because we are supporting Ukraine. Ukrainian fundraiser that we're doing for the FPV drones for the 93rd Brigade is still ongoing. We are very, very close, over 300,000 already gathered. Guys, let's do our best. Let's try to close it up and make sure that Ukraine finishes summer strong with all of the supplies that we can provide it. Trust in Ukraine and support Ukrainian armed forces. And with all of these things happening, one would expect that Putin will address this whole situation seriously, what is happening in Russia and the occupied territories, but instead he's participating in the cosplay events, where in unknown location that are camouflaged from the inside rather than the outside, he met while wearing some of these weird Russian fatigues with the generals that were serious faces, explained how well Russia is doing. And then Putin gave a speech talking that everything is fine, Russia is advancing everywhere, and situation on the front line is the best it has ever been. So how it is actually in reality. And in reality, it's not going well for Russia. Some of the latest week stats show that despite this being the midsummer, we're still trying to find that moment when are Russians finally gonna start gaining some ground, and they are not. It is very clear that Russians just are done. They are completely cooked more than the Europeans this summer with all of the heat. Russians are cooked. It is very clear to anyone that they're not achieving any of their goals. It's only Putin that is claiming that everything is going to be fine. But we're going to come back to that. Deep State has presented their chart of occupation of territories. We're interested right this at the end. 84 square kilometers that were technically captured by Russia during the month of June. The problem is Deep State released this chart, and they, in the same post, also stated that this is the most inaccurate chart that they have ever released. What they basically stated is that we're telling that Russia has captured 84 square kilometers, but we are not putting the territories that Ukrainians have actually recaptured in their counteroffensive actions that we know of, and they just haven't been reported. Basically acknowledging that Russia potentially has been advancing back to Russia rather than towards any kind of their goals, so to say. In the same video where Putin gave his cosplay speech, there was also other people talking, and behind some of the people there was a map. And on that map we saw how Russian Ministry of Defense is perceiving the situation on the front line. And some nice people actually overlaid that information against the map of Deep State. So here on this map, in yellow, you are seeing the difference between the territories, not only that Ukraine is supposedly controlling or Russians are controlling, but also the gray zones. So Russia overcolored here a lot. They basically are already telling that they're about to capture it here at the top, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, that they are already at that southwestern part, that they are almost as close to Zaporizhia. They are obviously capturing the legendary town of Mala Tokmachka and Orikhiv. So Russians here are reporting on this map that was in the wall on that video, they have advanced over 6 times even the most optimistic Russian Z propagandists are reporting. That is the level of delusion Putin is operating on. And while majority of people that are watching this channel are gonna accept that information as just a nice entertainment, there are some people that are like, yeah, but how can we make sure that that information is accurate? Maybe Ukrainians are just lying and actually Russians are having that massive success and Ukrainians are just trying to say no to us, despite all of the things that were happening before. Well, thankfully, Russians actually made a big deal because that Putin statement was a response to try to change the image of Russia. As Russia was having trouble with the images coming from Moscow, with the lid of their oil tanks just exploding right in the heart of Russia, those images are kind of not very nice for the reputation of Putin. Well, the only town that they're close on the front line to capture is Konstantinivka. That's why they were ordered to make a big deal of quote-unquote capturing the town of Konstantinivka. So in a very short period of time, Russia released some 10 videos of Russians showing flags on camera in different parts of the town of Konstantinivka. And this was wild because the videos that they showed obviously were not representatives. They were basically a guy that was sitting somewhere in a half basement, like looking around if there is any drone, just kind of sneakily get his Russian flag, show it on camera, and it's like, yes, we captured everything. And they presented that as a proof that Konstantinivka is captured. The problem with that is that Ukrainian armed forces are present in, well, Konstantinivka. And so Ukrainian soldiers saw those videos, saw the bullshit that Russians are telling, and decided to record videos themselves. Right there, from the town of Konstantinivka, showing our surroundings, showing that they're present, showing that they're fighting, and thankfully there is also OSINT analysis that has shown where exactly these shots were taken, and they were taken deep inside the city of Konstantinivka. So real situation actually I think is the best shown on this map right here, where we see this town. And Russians right now roughly control about 30% of the town. Another 20 to 30% of the town is gray area, where we saw some Russians come in with their flags, but also we saw Ukrainians showing that they are present in the city. But once again, just being present and recording a video somewhere does not really show control. So right now, Russians control about a third of Konstantinivka, and they're having massive trouble actually advancing. Ukrainians have sent in some reinforcements, and Russians are really struggling advancing further, despite this political pressure from Putin to just go forward, advance, capture the town. We need political victories because we're looking bad. Remember, Russia is fighting this war purely for propaganda purposes. There is no military solution. The town of Konstantinivka, with all respect to Ukrainians, it's a no-name place. The fact that it's being presented as some kind of a great achievement, despite just how literally marginal it is, with all of the respect to people from Konstantinivka. So coming back to some of my predictions for the Russian end of 2026 campaign, how much they can achieve during this year and claimed objectives, we talked about those minimal objectives that Russia must achieve to at least save like an itsy-bitsy of face. And we talked that all over the front line, they're completely failing those objectives, except for Konstantinivka, where they had some marginal success and Ukrainians were having some difficult battles. And I stated that it looks like that Russia might achieve those minimal objectives, at least on this specific direction, with the deadline that by the end of July, they will capture the town. With now July coming to about its first quarter, I can clearly state that town of Konstantinivka, by this point captured by just a third, is not nearly fast enough for Russians. They will not reach even those absolutely minimal objectives on this one direction. So I am now very clearly claiming that Russia failed the minimal of their objectives for 2026. Russia is officially cooked in Ukraine. And don't get me wrong, we obviously talk about the breaking point after which Ukraine sort of start having more success, the change of trend that Russia just cannot advance anymore. We are a little bit still away from Ukraine regaining all of their territory, but it's very clear where the wind is blowing by this point. Russia just cannot keep up. And the problem for Russia is that for every part of the territory that they try to capture at Konstantinivka, they are losing some territory elsewhere. Russia gains a little bit of ground in Konstantinivka. Well, now we have reports that Russia is having big trouble in Liman, this northern direction where Russia needs to capture key town. Well, now we have reports that Ukrainians have been succeeding in this fight on the northern side of this Liman axis. Specifically, the reports are that Ukrainians were able to recapture the town of Katerinivka. So if this is true, then Ukrainians now are putting pressure on this whole Russian salient. Now they are thinking about, well, how do we not get cut off, and not how do we capture the rest of this town? We talked about that Russia was advancing from the east towards the west, directly towards Sloviansk. And I was telling you that there is this triangle that Russia just needs to basically close because Ukrainians don't really have a lot of strong positions there. And that was over 5 months ago. That was literally when Russia was having success there. I said that most likely they're going to capture it. They're still not even halfway there. I cannot even go across the front line and tell you how bad Russia is doing because they're achieving nothing. And with Ukraine pummeling them in south of Ukraine, pummeling them in Crimea, making sure that life is hell for Russians. Transportation costs to the occupied territories have increased sixfold for Russians. It is absolutely atrocious how bad Russia is doing. Ukrainians are winning strategic war. We are definitely past the breaking point in favor of Ukraine. We're just not there when Russia really starts crumbling. But we are getting there. And with Ukraine striking the targets such as the Omsk refinery, we will see that crumbling happening faster and faster and faster. Putin has no military solution. He blew his only chance. And to be honest, I am pretty sure that if by September Putin will not accept any kind of a deal, then Ukraine is going to take it all back, one way or another. Support Ukrainian armed forces, participate in fundraiser. We can do it with your help. I love you. Slava Ukraini. I will see you next time.